Hey, what's up? It's Cute What If this side. Today we will be seeing, what if Analyst Deku becomes Vigilante? Now before we move ahead with the fic, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for future what ifs like this. Thoughts, flashback, TV, phone, texts. Izuku leapt over a gap between roofs, landing onto a shorter building's roof. A bandana covering his face and a hat over his head, hoodie on, a bat partially hanging out of his bag, sneakers, and sweatpants finishing his outfit. Landing with a roll, he continued running to the edge of a building and hopped onto a fire escape and ran down as quick as he could. Hopping off, he ran out of the alley and into the street. The reason he was running was because he was being chased after by someone wearing full black, white straps around their neck, and orange goggles. In other words, the underground hero Eraserhead. Why was a hero chasing Izuku, you ask? Well, maybe it had to do with the fact that the hero walked in on Izuku beating a guy up with a metal baseball bat. Okay, so that sounds bad, so here's what actually happened. Izuku stayed out a little late this night, hitting baseballs with his bat, wanting some stress release after a long day. Izuku lost track of time and decided to free run home. But with the lack of buildings close to the baseball field, he needed to walk a little before he could parkour his way to a Katsuden dinner. But as he turned the corner to climb up a fire escape, a man with long, razor-sharp claws cornered him wanting his wallet. So he defended himself. It just looked really bad when a hero sees you beating a man into the ground with a bat. Being unable to speak due to his nerves getting the better of him, Izuku ran. He's lucky he brought a bandana as a pseudo-face mask to keep his face from getting cold, or Eraserhead would know what he looked like. So here Izuku was, running away as fast as he could. As he jumped over the edge of a building, he barely dodged the flurry of the pro hero's capture gear as he descended the fire escape. Using his knowledge he had on the underground hero, Izuku dodged another swipe of the pro's gear by flinging himself to the right. He stumbled and landed onto his side before pushing himself up. Izuku ran into a busier part of the city, losing himself in the crowd. Shedding the hat and face mask to make sure Eraserhead couldn't find him again, stuffing them into his bag as he pulled out his phone. He wanted to get back to his house as quick as he could, so Izuku found the nearest street name, typed it into his phone's GPS, and got directions home. While it took longer than he would have liked to get home, Izuku was able to arrive at around 12:40 p.m. using some impromptu parkour. He unlocked his door, slid in as quietly as possible, took off his shoes, and tried to tiptoe to his room. Click. Keyword tried. His mom sat in a chair, leg crossed over the other as she brought her hand to point at the couch. The word sit was spoken without any words. Izuku went over to the couch and sat down, letting his bag slide off his shoulder and onto the ground, leaning it on the couch. Midoriya was, in a sense, a worrywart. When her son had to deal with the sudden realization that he had no quirk, she worried every night about him. Container after container of vanilla ice cream went down her gullet, making her chubby for a short time in her life. That was until she found her little Izuku was up at the break of dawn every morning, doing sit-ups, push-ups, and would keep doing so throughout the day. Soon after, he asked for her to join. While he never once said it, nor will ever admit it, he asked her because of her rapidly gaining weight. And it worked. He brought her out of her own depression and got her back to her slender form. Even while she kept her regular workout routine, Izuku kept improving his. Weights were bought, punching bags set up in the basement, he practiced baseball, and he even learned how to scale a building in 10 seconds flat. Which brings her back to the reason why she sat here. Why were you out so late? Inko asked as Izuku shifted in his chair. So I was out hitting, seeing if I could hit a ball into the stands. Izuku stuttered at first before collecting himself. And I lost track of time, so when I left to try and get home some guy tried to mug me. Inko's parent-patented disappointed face immediately shifted to one of concern as she launched herself off the couch and landed onto her knees in front of him, checking him over for bruises or cuts. Are you okay? Did you get hurt? What did he look like? Mom, I'm fine. Izuku calmed her as he waved his hands hurriedly in front of himself. He didn't touch me. Phew, that's a relief. I kinda beat him up with my bat before he could get me. That's not a relief. Inko sighed as she stood up, sitting down next to him on the couch. At least you called the police, right? Izuku. See, what had happened was, Izuku. A hero walked in on me hitting the guy and he kept asking questions and he was angry and I got scared and I ran away. And I'm sorry, Izuku shouted with a beet red face before pulling his hoodie over his head and shrunk inside the fabric, hiding his face. Inko sighed. A small chuckle escaped her mouth as she patted Izuku's back. It's okay, honey, at least you weren't hurt. Izuku slightly raised his head out of the hoodie. What if I get in trouble with the law? Then we will explain what happened. There had to be some CCTV cameras around and they'll have had to see what happened. You'll be fine. I guess. Izuku mumbled as he fully brought his head out. Good, now off to bed, mister. Inko playfully said as they both stood up. It's a school night. Yes, Mom. Izuku said as he walked away. Good night. Love you, sweetie. Good night. Love you too. Izuku laid his head down onto the desk as he finished the paper he was given. While he could go up for tomorrow's work to get ahead in class, but he was extremely tired. To give Izuku some credit, he had to wake up really early for school. Added to the fact that he was out really late the other night, Izuku was barely running on 4 hours of sleep. so he planned to get a little more sleep before his next class. Tap. Until he felt paper hit him in the back of his head. Sitting up slightly, he saw a couple kids in the back chuckling together as a few's eyes looked at him. He sighed and put his head back down. The crumpled piece of paper probably had some slur against the quirkless, calling him crippled or a waste of space. The usual. They could at least come up with something clever. Izuku thought as he closed his eyes again, ignoring another few more thrown pieces of paper before they stopped. 30 minutes passed and the bell rang, waking Izuku up from his nap as everyone else left. He stood up and stretched, yawning before collecting his things. As he left, he tossed the thrown pieces of paper into the recycle bin and walked out into the hall. Sometimes ignoring the bullying worked, for the most part. Izuku stepped aside as another guy tried to knock shoulders with him, even when there was room for him to walk without hitting him. Sighing, Izuku continued walking towards his class, ignoring the snickering he always heard as he walked away. He clenched the fist he rested in his pocket. Despite his calm and meek demeanor, he was very angry. Every day, the same things happened. They'd mess with him, he'd do nothing in return. No teacher would stop them from bothering him. Repeat. Like clockwork, every day. People would accidentally knock his books from his hands. If he used his locker, they'd put cripple or worthless onto it once they found out he used it. So he just carried all he had in his bag. Then he'd be tripped or shoved, knocked into. Every day it was something new. But what could he do about it? The teachers did neither, his mom tried and couldn't do anything. He was just stuck, unable to do anything at all. He was ready for the entry exam to UA. To get out of this constant loop of bullying, but that was a year away. He could do nothing but wait for the bullying to die out. It was all due to the fact he had no quirk. Because he had no quirk, he was told from the age of 3 he couldn't be a hero. Empty promises from fake friends in his first year of middle school. Then he simply lost those fake friends too. Bakugo hated him since he got his quirk and Izuku didn't. And that made him very, very angry. But at least he had an All Might podcast to listen to when he got home. That was something, right? Izuku walked out of the school. The final bell had already rung and dismissed them all. He had no homework, done all his extra credit, and was already the top of his class. Bakugo Katsuki, another student and an old friend, was close behind him. By one single point, too. Sadly, his old friend didn't take the news so lightly and just spurted off into a murmur of growls. He hasn't bothered Izuku today, spending most of his time either in study hall or on the school roof. Studying was something that the explosive blonde could do surprisingly well. Izuku could admit that. But he didn't know how to multitask. Izuku could. Autobooks reading out equations and Izuku solving them in his head as he attacked his punching bag. Another chin-up, another history fact learned. One thing after another until Izuku finished crafting his body and mind into a perfect mold for a hero. Izuku kept himself at peak health. He was ready for anything that UA would put him through. Bakugo was getting there still and he knew that Izuku was ahead of him. Back when Bakugo was more violent, he tried attacking Izuku multiple times. Explosion quirk or not, it was useless if it couldn't hit anybody. Izuku kept dodging him both figurative and literally until Bakugo ran out of steam. Thankfully, Bakugo calmed down over the years, and that's using the term calmed loosely. Izuku let out a groan as he stretched his joints and rolled his shoulders, walking downhill. Time for the usual shortcut under an overpass before heading home. Bam! What the Izuku shot around to see what made that noise. Izuku saw this green, slimy thing slither out from an open manhole. He took a step back as it formed into a larger mass with 2 eyes that popped out of the goop. The eyes swiveled around till they stared at him. Ha! A medium-sized invisible cloak. It gurgled before goop tendrils shot out at him. Meh, you'll do. Izuku's eyes widened as he bent his upper body backwards, dodging one tendril that was inches from his face before pushing himself to the side as another slammed at the spot he was. The teen slid into a stance as the goop tendrils returned towards the slime man. See, come on, let's just calm down and talk about this shit, Izuku cursed as he jumped over a sea of goop that all shot out towards him, pushing himself off the wall, and landed on the other side as the slime man reformed once more. It chuckled. I would love to talk, but I'm strapped for time. Hold still, this'll be over soon. Okay, calm down, he said to himself as he barely dodged the third flurry of slime tendrils. He's basically liquid. What can hit liquid? He racked his brain for answers until he stared at this guy's eyes. They seemed solid enough. Solid enough to see should be solid enough to hit, right? Izuku slid his bag off of one shoulder and held the straps in his other hand, crouching down into a stance. He just needed to get his eyes open for hits. Time for teenage taunts. See, come on man, you have to see how pedo this thing looks, right? Izuku's taunt seemed to get to the villain. What gross, I just need your body wait, I didn't mean it like that. Suyar. Izuku rolled his eyes, hoping the villain didn't notice him sweat. You couldn't just be a villain, you had to be a pedophile too. That did the trick. Just shut up, the villain screamed as he shot forth dozens of tendrils at Izuku. Said teen took a quick breath in before running forward, ducking under one tendril, and side-flipping in between 2. Using his momentum he got from his flip, he flung his bag straight into the villain's left eye. Gah! The villain screamed in agony as he started flinging his body back and forth, smashing into the sides of the overpass. Izuku landed on his side before pushing himself backwards, preparing to run away, but backed into something hard and Muscly. What the Izuku turned around but stopped talking as he saw who he ran into. Oh, All Might. HAHA, the number one hero laughed as he grinned and gave a thumbs up. You betcha I saw what you did to that villain. Mighty fine work there, lad. Guwaha. Izuku just stuttered, being completely speechless seeing not only his favorite hero but the number one hero in front of him. I don't care if I go down, I'm bringing that brat with me, the villain roared as it shot his body towards the two. Izuku's eyes widened as he walked backwards. All Might simply walked in front of Izuku and had his arm back. Don't worry my boy, I'll take care of the rest. That's the Izuku finally found words as he recognized All Might's stance. Texas Smash, All Might shouted as he punched the air so hard, it sent forth a shockwave of air, blasting the sludge man to bits. Ugh! The villain groaned from one of the many puddles that were scattered across the floor before he passed out. You blasted woo, Izuku stuttered as All Might strutted forwards, grabbing an empty bottle from his back pocket. Ahaha, I get that a lot. All Might quipped as he scooped the defeated villain into the bottle. I must commend you, young man, for holding him off. I apologize for not coming sooner, but as you can see he is quite the slippery opponent. Izuku finally snapped out of his stuttering trance and frantically waved his hands in front of him. No, it's fine, at least you came. All Might stood, having finished collecting all the slime, and tossed Izuku's discarded backpack to him. Thank you, but I must be off. This one needs to be brought to the police, All Might said as he shook the bottle. Wait, he wanted to. No, needed to ask this. I have a question. Send a letter and I'll try to answer it then, but I need to. Can I be a hero without a quirk? Izuku screamed at the top of his lungs as he bent forward into a bow, eyes clenched shut to feebly stop the tears that were coming. All Might slightly lowered his head and took a small breath. Something Izuku heard as he raised his head to stare at the number one hero. No, All Might spoke before he leaped off the ground, disappearing into the sky. What happened after that? Izuku felt nothing after that. No heavy heart, no sadness, nothing. He knew he should feel something, but it was just nothing. All Might, the number one hero, his hero, was like everyone else. Saw him like everyone else. Someone barely worth their time. Izuku was just a cripple. He spoke, tears slowly streaming down his face. The train ride home happened in a blur. Him unlocking the front door and walking inside happened in an instant. He was just in his room, standing there in his shoes, suddenly aware of how much merch he had of the number one hero. That empty feeling that guided him away, that feeling was replaced by anger. Lashing out at the closest thing nearby, Izuku smashed his arm into a bookcase filled with All Might figures or some other wasteful shit, breaking the piece of wood holding up one side, making it fall over. He raised his foot and stomped down onto the wood, breaking it with each stomp. Huffing in and out, Izuku fought to catch his breath as he finally stopped. He let himself fall onto his bed and letting his head fall into his hands. I'm not a cripple. Izuku spoke through his tears. I'm not a cripple. Izuku. He looked up, seeing his mother's face filled with worry. Izuku looked for words but just let his head fall. I'm not. He didn't notice his mom run to him, but he felt her wrap her arms around him. She whispered something to him as they rocked back and forth. Inko knew something was wrong. She wanted to know what was wrong, but she'll ask later. Right now Izuku needed her. He needed somebody. Thoughts, flashback, TV, phone, texts. Izuku walked around, walking against a crowd with a plastic bag in his hand. After that episode, Izuku had to be somewhere else. And just as you would have it, him and his mom needed milk. They were almost out. Almost out, it was almost empty, and if it's empty then we can't have cereal. And if we can't have cereal then we can't have breakfast. If we don't have breakfast we could have eggs and toast, but without a glass of milk it wouldn't. Izuku mutterings continued as he walked. Before long, he was at the scene of a hero attack. Izuku confusedly looked around, the shouting of nearby heroes being an afterthought. Their voices muffled as Izuku began muttering once more. But I'm sure I was walking home. I must have walked here on instinct. I don't even have a notebook to take notes on the heroes. Izuku laughed mirthlessly as he turned to walk away. They're not even doing anything anyways. He almost walked away and let the scene play out. Let whatever was going to happen. And he would have, if it wasn't for a familiar-sounding explosion blasting out into the air, causing Izuku's eyes to widen drastically before spinning around. He looked closer and saw the sludge villain from before, who was wrapped around someone he knew well. Bakugo, Izuku shouted as he walked further up, pushing himself through the crowd. How did the villain get away from All Might? It didn't make sense, even if All Might wasn't his most favorite person right now. Izuku was sure that he couldn't have gotten away. How did the number one hero let a 2-bit criminal get away? How was this guy managing to hold off nearly 4 pro heroes? Why was no one doing anything? It's All Might. How did All Might lose this thighs? No name. Izuku gritted his teeth, his fist tightening around the plastic strap that held the gallon of milk. How did he manage to this up? Izuku shouted angrily. Suddenly, he bursted off into a dash, dunking under a hero's arm who tried to stop him. All Might wanted to preach about being a hero who saved everyone. Then where was he when the villain on his watch escaped and was going to kill someone? Izuku ran forward, using his anger at the failure of the so-called symbol of peace, ignoring the shouts of the pros and the crowd of spectators behind him. All the shouting about someone else entering the fray dragged the sludge villain's attention towards Izuku. His eyes, one of them having seen better days, glared at Izuku. This is all your fault, you little shit." He brought up his sludge and sent it spiraling towards the green-haired teen. Said teen spun around the attack and pegged the gallon of milk he had in a bag directly at the villain's eye, coincidentally the same one he hit before. As the criminal reeled back in agony, screaming something offensive, Izuku kept running, using his momentum to drive his body straight through the sludge, dragging Bakugo out with him. The two boys landed roughly, Bakugo pushing himself onto his hands and knees to gasp for air, coughing out a small amount of sludge, as Izuku pushed himself into a sitting position. Once Bakugo caught his breath, he turned his head to glare at Izuku. Izuku noticed the angry glare and asked, "What? I didn't need your help, asshole. I had it under control," Bakugo growled. Usually, Izuku would have shrunk back against his old friend's anger, but the roller coaster of emotions seemed to dry him of all his fear. "Yeah, Main Street really thanks you for all the fire and explosion damage. Why did you just shit move?" Bakugo started before shoving himself off the ground and tackled Izuku out of the way as a large tendril slammed down where Izuku once was. They landed with a start. Bakugo and Izuku ran in opposite directions as the sludge villain swatted aimlessly at them. Izuku moved towards Mount Lady, Bakugo towards Kamui Woods and Death Arms. The villain swung himself around in a circle, lashing out at anything near him. Luckily it was only debris, all other civilians being behind pros, and Bakugo backed up enough to be out of harm's way. The sludge villain stopped his mini-tornado and raised his one good eye to stare at the boy who caused this. Yaoi with a roar, he flung himself at Izuku. For the second time, Izuku realized that he was facing down a raging villain. When did he get all this courage? Where did he get it? He couldn't tell you. But as the villain got closer, Mount Lady cheered as she finally fit her arm slightly between the two buildings and slammed down hard onto the villain's sludge form. Izuku figured it out. It wasn't an ingenious plan or quirk. It wasn't even a conscious move. My legs moved on their own, Izuku whispered to himself as the sludge villain gurgled in pain. The pro hero who stopped the villain cheered once more, as she scooped the villain up in both her hands as the crowd yelled in joy. With the villain defeated, the police ran in with a proper containment unit to hold the villain. Then the news crew came in, first swarming Bakugo. With questions and attempts at interviewing the volatile boy before the medics pushed through the news crew to try to give Bakugo a checkup. Izuku was able to walk away from everyone, long before they questioned who was it who ran in to save the explosive boy. A few blocks away, Izuku leaned against a wall and slid down till he was sitting. The adrenaline having worn off and his body feeling tired, he let his eyes close. He sat there, on a random street with nothing but his thoughts with him. He thought back to yesterday when he fought off the mugger, then outran a pro, and then today, fighting off a villain. Not once, but twice. He couldn't beat the villain, a pro needed to step in to finish it. But what if he could prepare himself for these things? Some high or low temperatures could have stopped. Izuku just thought of the name, sludge, in his tracks. Izuku saw how melty sludge looked when Bakugo was blasting away. A simple box of firecrackers would have beaten the villain. Backdraft was there as well. He could have watered down sludge while helping to stop the fires. Izuku mumbled as he felt his shake. Not in disappointment or sadness as he was used to. No, this time it was for the complete opposite. Excitement. Izuku's eyes opened with determination as he stood up. If heroes failed, then he would pick up the slack. All Might was wrong. I can be a hero. To Izuku, the cold was the best temperature. Woke you up if you were tired, didn't have to worry about smelling like sweat, and when you were up at midnight running across rooftops, you could always keep yourself aware at all times. Which is what he was doing right now. Parkour is something he has practiced since he could climb. Ever since Bakugo blasted him away for trying to help him up in the river, Izuku climbed back up the rocks. Ever since he learned to climb a tree, he found a new one even bigger to climb. Since childhood, Izuku had practiced running and climbing. Flipping across a rooftop onto another was only a difference in the mind. Roll, push myself up, run. The mantra repeated itself in his head as Izuku took off across town. His muscles have yet to start to burn yet. That's good. He needed to keep running for a couple more hours. He kept his baseball bat in a bag made to hold one, so he didn't have to worry about it falling out when he would roll. He tightened the strap that was over his shoulder and went across his before he jumped once more onto a pipe, pulling himself up and over a ledge before pushing himself to stand up. He stopped for a minute to catch his breath as he looked up towards the horizon. Okay, what time is it? Izuku huffed as he pulled his phone out to look at the time. 12:49, okay. One more hour. I can do that. Before he took off running. In all honesty, what was Izuku thinking being a vigilante? That's stupid. Heroes were beaming in this day and age, of course there wouldn't be. Someone help, a voice screamed as Izuku stopped still, waiting for a hero to go help the person. Yeah, Izuku remembered before he ran to the voice. He was supposed to be the hero. He stopped at a ledge and looked down into an alley that led to a parking lot. A man with 4 arms was holding a man up by the throat with one of his arms. The other 3 limbs were rummaging through a bag. Okay, just like the mugger. Jump down and hit, Izuku said as he forced himself to calm down. Just like sludge. He lifted up his face mask, raised his hood over his head, and took out his back. Let's go, Izuku whispered as he jumped down. He held her by her throat, ripping at her body with his other jagged hand. Hor thought she was top shit stupid in cunt. He was top shit him. Me was all that was heard as he raised a hand to break her. A figure dressed and dropped down onto his back, right beneath his shoulders blades. He cried out before the butt of a bat nailed him in his nose. Dripped down before he raised his hand to swat the mystery man off, already having let the woman go, who slipped away. The stranger used his feet to push him face first into the brick wall. He fell to his knees as he held his broken nose, trying to stop the gushing. He stared up. Blurry images came into his sight as he saw the stranger step in front of him, bat over his shoulder. The stranger lifted it off his shoulder before aiming it back and hitting him square on top of the head, knocking the attacker out. With a small cough, Izuku breathed heavily as he caught his breath, slowing down the adrenaline, shaking the bat lightly to try to get off before sliding his bag down to put the bat in. As he was on his knee, putting it in, he saw the woman walk over cautiously. Is he dead? She asked, scared. Izuku quickly shook his head. No, I just knocked him out. She huffed out a shaky breath as Izuku finally got his bag zipped shut and stood up. As he was about to leave, the woman spoke. That's my ex-boyfriend. She spoke. Two dumped him because he wouldn't stop yelling and breaking stuff. He was gonna hit me one day and I just ran. I didn't think he would. She stopped and started crying, holding herself. Izuku stalled for a second before walking over and putting a hand on her shoulder. Heroes help after the villain is defeated too. It's over now. He won't hurt you anymore. She cried before yanking Izuku into a hug. Shiem was almost twice as tall as him, so he fought to keep his hormones down, ignoring how he was pulled directly into her large S. It took a bit of back rubbing and calming reassurances before she let him go. Sorry about that, she mumbled, wiping away tears. Izuku blushed underneath his face mask and waved it off. It's fine, ma'am. As long as I'm around, I won't let anything like this happen again. Hev, she chuckled. Reminds me of All Might. Yano, just smaller and cuter. Izuku bursted into a flurry of stutters, making the women laugh. Two should get going. Izuku stuttered as he climbed up a nearby fire escape. Stay safe. I will. Gonna head straight home after I call the cops on this guy's sorry ass. She glared at the down man. Izuku waved as he reached the top. Just before he left, the lady called out to him. Wait, what's your name? He stopped for a second. He never really thought of a name. That's kinda dumb, now that he thinks about it. This was more of an event. A test run. This was successful, sure, but he thought it would be worse. But look at him, not a scratch. If he was gonna be serious with this, he needed a name. Simple, one that everyone could say and know without any clarification. Too many pros had difficulty with name picking, but Izuku has one in mind. Hood. He spoke loud and clear before bursting into a sprint. Izuku pulled his hood further down as two men advanced on him. One had big blocky hands and another was a wolf man. Izuku was able to take down their friend before he could react, but the other two weren't happy. The guy they were going to mug had long since ran away. He held his bat in a tight grip as the growling wolf man lunged at him. Izuku backed away, dodging the first punch but got hit in the gut by the second hit. His breath was knocked out of him, making him wildly swing the bat onto the top of the man's head. The wolf covered his head in pain as the big-handed man came in with a right hook. Izuku fell to a knee to dodge the punch and grabbed the man's leg, lifting his body up before slamming him hard onto the pavement. Izuku got back on his feet and slammed the bat into the man's face, breaking his nose. Before he could hit again, the wolf man tackled him, making Izuku drop his bat, and began clawing at Izuku's covered face. The teen brought his arms up to defend himself, his hoodie sleeves getting ripped in the process as well as cuts on his arm. When he felt an opening, Izuku striked, punching the wolf in the jugular. He coughed and grabbed at his throat, letting the teen raise his feet and slam them into his attackers. The wolf man was flung off as Izuku pushed himself up and dashed forward to the wolf, using his knee to hit him in the nose. The man collapsed, both struggling to breathe and hold his face. As Izuku was fighting to catch his breath, he felt his own bat hit his side. Izuku stumbled back and held his side, seeing the first guy looking pissed off holding his bat. Mother, Izuku thought as he held his side. That's mine. He backed away slightly as the man swung again. He ducked back and into some old trash cans. The ones with the metal lids. That gave him an idea. He grabbed a lid as he got swung at again, using it to block the attack before sliding forward, decking the man in the face with his elbow, hitting his already broken nose. He grabbed another lid and used them both to smash the man on both sides of his head. With a cry, Izuku slammed his leg into the man's side, finally getting him to drop Izuku's bat. Picking up his bat, Izuku let it rest onto his shoulder to catch his breath as the two backed away. You want some more, he said in false bravado. He felt pretty tired, plus his hands felt like hell with all the hitting he was doing with his bat. Vibrations are a bitch. Before the fight could continue, sirens were heard. You little shit, we'll get you next time, the block-fisted man yelled. The wolf man picked up the third down man and lifted him over his shoulder. We'll get you next time, you sound like a cartoon villain. But he beat our asses and we're just gonna. Just shut up and run, the cops are here, the wolfman yelled as he started to run, the other following suit after a shaking fist towards Izuku. Said teen had begun his run up a fire escape, bat tucked into his bag, and ass currently being hauled. Shouts of police being a big motivator as Izuku ran even faster. His mom will flip out if she finds out. Worse, she may faint again. Izuku slid his hoodie over his head, bringing his shirt up with it, wincing as the cloth brushed across his bruised torso. He got lucky 2 weeks ago. That was his last fight, but certainly not his last outing. Criminal activity wasn't as crazy as it was in the day. Considering most villains had crazy quirks, they usually had the idea, hey, it's time to get attention, and would attack during the day. So he mostly got either a quiet night. That's not even considering the fact they may just be plain stupid. Izuku mumbled, rummaging through the medicine cabinet, thinking they can take on some of the heavy hitters in the pro leagues just because they have a semi-powerful quirk. The people with average quirks were the ones who would mug or wait to attack people during the night, but most of them would struggle with their choice to rob someone. The consequences of the Age of Peace. Finding what he was looking for, Izuku closed the cabinet and grunted as he rubbed peroxide onto the cuts that the wolf man left on his arms. Once he was done, he grabbed the gauze to wrap them up. There was nothing much he could do for the bruises besides ice and rest. Unless he had internal bleeding, but he was 100% sure he didn't. He'd be in much more pain if he was. Medical research and first aid practice let him know exactly when he needed treatment. He slipped off his cargo pants once he finished cleaning himself up. He walked out of the bathroom and back to his bedroom. He had around 3 hours before he had to get to school. Not enough sleep for the average person, but by utilizing power napping, he made up for it. It felt like he had a lot more time nowadays. Not just that, the adrenaline rush he felt when running around at night was addicting. The feeling he got when patrolling the town and helping people was amazing. He couldn't stop. He won't stop. It made him feel alive. It made him feel useful. Anything other than the cripple everyone said he was. Stifling a yawn, Izuku scribbled down the last of his notes for class and laid his pencil down. Class was on for another 20 minutes, but he finished early. Not wanting to sit still for the next 20 minutes, he raised his hand, asking to use the bathroom. Once he got the pass, he left the room. He walked around in the hallway, stretching his back and arms, wincing at his bruises. Quirk history class was an interesting one. He enjoyed it, but it could only say so much about quirks before they start repeating material. It wasn't that surprising when Izuku thought about it. Even with the huge amount of quirks that were around and the sense of normality, the human race was only in its 4th generation dealing with quirks. Meh. Izuku shrugged. It'll be solved eventually, either through war crimes or study of donated bodies. Izuku used to think that he needed answers as soon as he could get them. But All Might showed him that some questions don't need to be answered. Great. Izuku sighed as he walked to the bathroom. Now I'm in a bad mood. He walked in, wrinkling his nose at the horrible smell, and headed for his stall. 3 other guys were at the urinals, but they weren't really using them. One was smoking and the other 2 were on their phones. Not a surprise. This school wasn't really that great of a place. Delinquents and that kind of stuff. Bakugo, for all his anger and rage, was well behaved considering the other students. Izuku went to a stall, took a piss, made sure not to piss on the seat because he's not an asshole, and went to wash his hands. As he finished and went to go dry his hands, one of the kids spoke up. Yo, quirkless. A black-haired, sharp-toothed kid spoke. He pocketed his phone and walked forwards as Izuku finished drying his hands. Yo, Earth to dumbass you there. He's quirkless, what'd you expect, the smoker said. He's crippled already, him being ed up in the head was only a matter of time. The third guy started laughing as Sharptooth leaned forward, letting his arm rest on Izuku's shoulder. Yo, cripple, I got a question. Is it true your mom had to suck off the principal to let you into SCO? Sharptooth was cut off as Izuku spun around, murder in his shot eyes, and decked the guy in his face. He fell down hard as Izuku stepped forward and stomped his head into the ground when Sharptooth tried to get up. The other 2 were frozen in place as Sharptooth stopped moving with Izuku standing over him, breathing like a beast. He glared at them before turning around and leaving the bathroom. He power walked back to class, shoved his way in, and sat back down. He wanted to hurt that little shit so much more. He wanted to break all of the bones in the Ur's body. He should have, and Izuku was half tempted to get back up and go back, but he restrained himself. Nobody, and I mean nobody, talks shit about my mom. Izuku growled in his head, his body still shaking. I'll up All Might if I have to. In all of Izuku's anger, he forgot that he left the pass in the bathroom. To be fair, Izuku wasn't a perfect child, and Ko knew that. She and him got into arguments like any child and parent. They wanted one thing and the parent couldn't get it, or the child didn't need it. Arguments were scarce since Izuku got older. He got more mature since he started training, but she still had to point him in the right direction every once in a while like any good parent should. But she has never seen him lash out violently for no reason. So it came as a surprise that she got a call from the school saying that Izuku sent another student to the hospital. They asked her to come in and she left work early to go talk with the principal. She arrived at the school, took a deep breath, and walked in. Izuku, you better have a good explanation for this. He probably should have grabbed his pass. Then he could have lied his way out of this mess, but they probably still could have nailed him. Cameras outside the bathroom seeing him go in and out at the same time as the incident. Connect the dots, something he did to find clues to stop a mugging, was now the same process being used to bite him in the ass. Izuku leaned back into the chair outside of the principal's office with a big sigh. Great. Footsteps caught his attention, ones he recognized. He looked over and saw his mom, disappointment across her face, walking towards the office door. The principal opened the door and looked out. "Ah, Mrs. Midoriya, right on time. Please come in, and you too, Izuku." Izuku got up and followed his mom in. Him and his mom sat in chairs next to each other in front of the principal's desk. "So," he started, "Jan Lark was brought to our nurse's office by his classmates. He had a swollen eye, broken nose, and a concussion. Currently he is at the hospital getting treatment. While our nurse can heal him, we can't do it in a time quick enough to stop any bad after effects of a concussion." Mom nodded. "Originally, I found it extremely difficult to believe one of our honor students, a quirkless one no less, sent one of our students to the hospital." Izuku's eyes got sharper and harder at that, something which Inko noticed. The principal kept going. "But after 2 eyewitnesses, the cameras outside the bathroom, and a bathroom pass from Izuku's class at the time, all the evidence stacks up." Inko nodded at that before speaking. "Izuku." "Yes, Mom. What happened?" That was it. No anger, no disappointment, just simply asking what happened. Nervous as he was, he answered. "I went to the bathroom because I had to go. I went in and used the bathroom." Izuku started. "When I finished and went to use the bathroom, those guys started messing with me." "You can't excuse your actions just by the principal started before Inko interrupted. "Mr. Yashimana," Izuku is still explaining. Inko stopped the principal. While she spoke nicely, she looked like a viper. The principal gulped as Izuku stifled a laugh. "Go on, Izuku." "Oh yeah, it's Mom. So, the guys were messing with me. They said I was CR crippled and mentally retarded because I was trying to ignore them. Then the one guy walked over and put his arm around my shoulder and asked if my mom had to do things to get me in this school." Inko took a sharp breath in as the principal scooted backwards slightly in his roller chair. "And I lost my temper and beat the shikrap out of him." Izuku finished, avoiding swearing. Inko blinked a few times before standing up and walking towards the door. "I've heard what I needed to know. Let's go home, Izuku." Izuku stumbled slightly before standing up and following. "Yes, Mom. And Mrs. Midoriya, you can't leave just yet. Your son's actions can't be excused because my son's actions." Inko turned with a shout, causing Izuku to shoot himself backwards into a wall, out of the way his mother's wrath, and the principal ducked down behind his desk. "Are caused because of your failing education system not helping my son with obvious bullying. If you even think about trying to get him in trouble, I will personally sue you and this school into the ground for ignoring my son just for his lack of a stupid quirk." Huffing and puffing, Inko slowly caught her breath and stood up slightly straighter. "Now, if we're quite finished, let's head home, Izuku." Have a good day, Mom." The once intimidating principal now reduced to a sniveling child. Izuku snorted, hiding a grin before following his mom. "Don't with the Midoriyas. We got angry moms," Izuku thought with a grin on his face. As he slid in the passenger seat, he had the pleasure of listening to his mom ranting about how worthless the school is. He loved his mom. And that sniveling coward tried to act all high and mighty until his precious positional power was in danger. I have half a mind to. He really loved his mom.